All right, Frank, Kate, we are talking today. This is our second to last recording, and we're talking about CTAs. So call to action. That's the thing that you see at the bottom of footers that says stuff like reach out to us, let's hang, let's get this project going, whatever that may actually be. So going to talk a little bit about call to actions. And the super fun part about all of this is got literally the dream team together here at RedTree, with Kate being our designer and Frank being our developer. The two of them work pretty hand in hand for almost all of our projects. So this was really, in my opinion, great to get you both in the same room, talk about call to actions. So my first question to both of you, and Frank, you can go ahead and kick us off, is when you're building out a website, what's the first thing, or Kate, in your instance, when you're designing out the website, what's the first thing that you think of whenever it comes to call to actions?
Okay, so from a technical standpoint or a developer standpoint, the call to basically where are these pages going? What design elements do they share? Just I treat them like a section, a regular section as in any part of the website, or is the design of the CTA congruent to the rest of the site, or is it a one-off? And basically, where in the site is this supposed to go, and where on the user's journey should things appear, and how to convey to the user that this is something that they want to click while not messing anything else up, obviously.
Which is crazy, Frank, because how many times have you gone to a website? So it's so simple, but how many times have you gone to a website and you go to click on something and it's just doesn't take you anywhere. It takes you somewhere random. It takes you to a 404. So even just thinking about the click, I mean, that's a major step.
How do you maintain the CTAs in the future? If you want to, again, the marketing goals change, do we have just one central spot where the CTA can live? Is this CTA built with scalability in mind, just like any other section on the site? And basically so for me it's more so data questions and just general usability.
What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I would say from a design standpoint, it's really about making sure that when I'm designing that section, no matter where it is on the page, that the action is really clear. That's the first thing that I'm really taking into consideration, that the visitor knows right away that, yeah, the button they're about to click is going to take them to where they want to go, and that's going to do the action that we just convinced them to do, through having something that really called to them. So yeah, it's just making sure that within that section, within the call to action, that the visual hierarchy is clear. So we have a headline that really, it tells you exactly what we are asking of them or telling them about, informing them about. And then a button that is really clear where that action is about to go and what's about to happen.
So Kate, you brought up a good point about the visual hierarchy. And sometimes when we have a page, we have multiple call to actions on a page. So how do you, from a design perspective, balance the visual hierarchy of those call to actions?
Right. I would say really it's taking into consideration what the priorities and goals, like the strategy priorities and goals are. So let's say our main goal is that we want users to go down two different funnels. We want them to either, make one of two choices. So so that's our main goal. And we are going to want that goal to be on the very top of the page, right when they land on the page, before the user even has to scroll. We want it to be super apparent that they have these two choices, their first action to take. And so that's our highest priority goal in that above the fold section. And so as we move further down the page, those are our next lower priority calls to action. And I'm also looking at what the sections above and below the call to actions are, how they're relating to that call to action. So it's relating visually and content wise. And so are we telling a story that leads into that call to action and then really drives the action home for the visitor?
Yeah, I like the fact that you talked about the story, because sometimes there is a call to action that can't be too high up on a page or can't have too much emphasis. We need to talk maybe about the organization before that call to action sends them to an about page, or talks about who they would be talking to in that sort of CTA to lead to a conversion. Need to talk to a sales rep, right? We have to talk about the sales reps before we talk about that conversion. So I love your definition of where in the story of the page is the best place to put the call to action. And then Frank, what are some technical pitfalls that you see whenever it comes to call to actions, whether that be buttons or how they're dev'd out? You mentioned a little bit of this about building out almost like a library, UI library, or whatever that may be. But what are some pitfalls that you might see?
Technical pitfalls that I see are usually when usually making CTAs easily updatable. So if there's if this CTA is shared across like multiple pages, is there one central hub where you can update that thing? So it's easy so that our clients are kind of like empowered to do that thing and move swiftly if they need to. That's part of what we offer as a web development agency. Like, this is your site, so you do want to be able to like easily change these for your marketing goals. Another thing is, and this will probably come up later, is making sure that CTAs are able to be gracefully degraded. What that means is that it works with JavaScript and without JavaScript. Now, this might change depending on what the data for your specific site is, how users are using your site. Are they businesses that need to reach the site, and they need to be able to read the site without JavaScript? I know in general a lot of government websites are like that. So government employees need to be able to use sites without JavaScript. If you do have and if you only exist in JavaScript and you have no fallback, then they're not going to be able to see that. Just keep in mind that CTAs can be anything. From a marketing standpoint, they could be, oh, I want you to click on this to access a service, but sometimes it's more like, okay, internal employees need to see this form, and we need to have this big old button so that they can see the form. But yeah, usually it's usually that, and usually just making sure that it can be accessed without JavaScript, or it can be used without JavaScript. We sometimes get caught up on the fancier elements of making sure the CTA is animated and runs in and catches the user's eye, but you also just need to make sure that sometimes that's not available for every user, especially if they're on a slower web browser or employees that just can't use JavaScript.
Which is the yin and the yang at RedTree, right? So Kate's going to come in, Kate's going to make the wow and amazing designs and animations, and then Frank makes sure it works, everybody. Like,
just a little bit for just making sure that it works for people that just won't be able to see all that stuff, or just at slower web connections, things like that. So
yeah. I would say one of the things I always tell people too, whenever it comes to call to actions, is to make sure that you're being selective of them. So I can't tell you how many times I've come to a page and there is 5 different call to actions, all for various things, right? Talk to a sales rep, download this, fill out this form, download our guide, contact us, right? And what that says most of the time, which we'll talk a little bit about this because our next videos with Davina on conversions, but that says that you don't understand your user, or you're not telling an appropriate story, and you're just wanting basically to throw everything at them to try to get them to convert. And the result will be no conversions. But if you go down to 1, maybe 2, as Kate was talking about with the story and the appropriate placement, you will definitely get more conversions, especially if you know why a user is actually going there. So that's always been one of my biggest suggestions, is less is more. So to that end, I'd love to know from both of you, because you guys are in websites all the time, what is either your best CTA you've ever seen or the worst CTA that you've ever seen?
All right. I'll take this first. As I said, I said it'll come up later, but I'm not going to implicate any like sites from any competitors, or just I'll implicate myself. And so this earlier in my career, I had known about the concept of graceful degradation, but it hadn't come up like a lot of times. But this time it did, and I was making a site for a local government organization, and there was a CTA, and it was designed out. It was supposed to be a pop-up, looked really nice. Guide was supposed to, guide the users to a form. This was this was just for like general housing, so users would come in, click, and then you could scroll out. You might mouse out, and after you mouse out, the CTA was supposed to come up. But a lot of users back in that time, or a significant amount, I believe it was around 10% of users didn't use JavaScript on the site, so they never saw the CTA. And I think the worst CTA is the one you never see, because you won't get that did teach me about the concept of graceful degradation across like anything that you want your users to see. It is extremely important that users see it, and that your users don't use JavaScript. Just add a little note, like a little no script option for those users. Be nice to them. That's about.
Yeah, I would say from my design perspective, some of the worst, I'm coming from it as a more generally, not necessarily a specific worst case example that I can think of. But more generally, I think the call to actions that really just lack intentionality. So having the same call to action that appears on every page, to me, why not just put that information in the footer? If that's something that we want them to act on, no matter where they are in the site, we'll put that in the footer. But when it comes to, all the other pages, we don't want visitors to start to get really like used to seeing something, and they kind of become blind to it after they see it over and over. So we want these CTAs to be impactful. And so some of the worst case scenarios is when you just have this thing that appears on every page and doesn't really relate to like what we were talking about, the story that happens as you're moving down the page. If you don't have that, and you just, like you were saying earlier, Misha, you just have reach out to a rep, call this number, click this button, and there's no story being told. Users get used to seeing that thing over and over, and they become blind to it. And they also, like you were saying, they have no clear like direction to go. We're not really leading them where we want them to go. So yeah, those just generally, that's the lack of intentionality is where I think the worst kind of call to actions.
I will say my favorite CTA that I've ever seen. I do a lot of online shopping for blazers because there's not a lot of women's type of blazers in the store, right? So I was online and there was a blazer, and then underneath it talked a little bit about the company itself. But then that bottom CTA that you were talking about, Kate, said, "You would look like a boss in this suit." And I was like, yes, I would. And it goes back to that. And then it said underneath it, add to cart, right? So for me, we're going back to this. They were telling the story. They connected with the user. They knew sort of the right things to say, even for that specific page. And hopefully it didn't have JavaScript associated with it, or 10% of people wouldn't see it, but like that was a really good call to action. And I'm sure that they probably had a lot of people who converted with that call to action. Our next video is going to be with Davina. We're going to be talking about conversions. So thank you all so much. Thanks, Kate.